Hello. Hello, everyone. Hi, Lee. Are we ready to go?
Hi, Vicky.
Hello.
Hello, Vicky. How are you? Hello, Lee. Ruben.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so I think most of our presenters are here today. Let me just check quickly. So Francisco Giovanni is here. Juan Carlos.
Here we are here.
And Ruben. Okay, so
I'm here. Sylvia.
Thank you very much. So I think all the presenters from 1 to 3 are already here. Should we start?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. This is really an exciting time and we were really looking forward to getting started. Our group is set in different places in Latin America, mainly Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Argentina. What we're going to be doing today, we have 3 sessions of 3 slots. And the first one is making knowledge in different research fields. And we have different presenters from Latin America, Dr. Javier Camacho Morales from Mexico, Maestra Sylvia Moraga Toledo from Chile, Maestro Giovanni García Castro from Colombia, Dr. Javier Ruiz Ortega from Colombia, Ruben Massey from Argentina, and myself. And we will start with this talk, making knowledge in different research fields visible. And what I would like to tell you is that as we thought of this presentation because of a personal interest and because the presenters in the regions saw a need to make knowledge visible. So the way it's going to work is each of them is going to present the research and the things that they are going to be doing. They are going to present for 15-20 minutes. We will have like 5 minutes for question and answers, just for questions that are for those presented and at that moment. But at the end, we'll keep some minutes for a discussion, okay? So you can ask questions at the end of every session or every presentation, but also at the end of the slot, we can have a conversation. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing and pass it to Javier, so he's going to present first.
Javier, you are muted, Javier. You are muted.
Second. Okay, now, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Nice. Second chances are great. So a new presentation. Thank you for being here. I hope my English doesn't fail me today. And let's hope we can give this presentation without any incident. So what I'm going to show you today is part of my doctoral thesis, where I analyze the relations made between specialized knowledge, which is that of science, and different types of context, which would allow to explain many of the concepts and theories that science tries to understand. And this is through books made for children, books about science communication. So, oh, 1 second, here we go. The idea is to find the ways in which science presents knowledge in a context that it's not specifically from science. So the language in which it's presented brings about different types of dynamics through the text and through the reading of the text that allow to build new knowledge in a way that becomes that presents a sort of a specialized knowledge to children who wouldn't have the linguistic resources to understand the whole scientific process. So these are some of the books that I've analyzed. The top row are all books about astronomy. They all talk about space, planets, different astronomical objects, or space exploration. And the bottom row is about laws of motion, specifically how mechanics and dynamics, the basis of mechanics and dynamics. And these other two books are referential books. They talk about several scientific topics. They range from anything from microbiology, renewable energies, of course, the hard ones, chemistry, biology, physics, math. One of them even talks about science fiction. So it's a lot of topics of through the scientific lens. And what I tried to do with this is to understand how this knowledge is built. We analyze the types of structures in these texts that I've showed you. For this, we used what Christian Matheson presents as registerial cartography, which talks about fields of activity, that is, what is going on in the text at any certain point. With this, we can talk about register as an adaptation of the meaning-making resources of a language according to its context of use, and of course, according to particular objectives of the writer in this case. And the idea is was at the beginning of my research to find a way to visualize these relations through two different methods. First one is this one, that is register cartography, and we found a way to graph it with chord diagrams, they're called. So this is what we found. For these circles, on the left side of each circle, there's the titles of the books that were analyzed. On the left circle, for example, we have Observa el cielo nocturno, which is a manual about sky observation through a telescope or through binoculars. Descubramos el espacio exterior, which and Aventúrate en una misión para explorar el espacio. I don't know if you can see my cursor, my mouse. Can you see it? Well, these two are about space. They're referential books about space and space exploration exclusively. And this last one, Mensajero de las Estrellas, is sort of a biography of Galilei and his scientific discoveries. And on the right side, we have the books that are all about the laws of motion. Fun science, fun physics is the first one, Hugo on the laws of motion, force and motion, how do machines work, and roller coaster of science. These all talk about the laws of motion. And on the right side of each circle, we find the registers that were found in each of these books. And this becomes a little bit more clear, will become a little bit more clear in a second. And the last two books, these are the books about different scientific topics. So we can see that it has three main registers that were found. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. These are the maps for narrative books. So in this case, we found registers that allow to build a narrative. And through that narrative, we can find moments in which science is explained. So we have this large section, the green section, is a register called expounding, which comprises contexts in which explanations are being built, or forms of analogies, or forms of categorization. So it's all about building several types of explanations. So we find that there's a balance between how many registers of recreation of building this narrative are being related to context in which an explanation is being presented. You can tell the balance in the width of each one of these chords. The width represents how many times this register appeared in each of the books. For referential maps, we can find that there's a switch. In this case, a referential book tends more to present many explanations in the way of an encyclopedia or of a dictionary. So you find the concept that you're trying to look for, you try to find the word that you're trying to look for, and it gives you a short explanation about that and how it works, what it does, and its relation to any other field of knowledge. In this case, for the science communications books, we find that there's this scientific, I would say build up, because it's not exactly the knowledge of science, but it becomes a way to describe the whole process of how scientific knowledge is being made. So it talks about scientific concepts and theories, but it also talks about how or what makes a scientist, what makes a scientific knowledge, how does it work, how do you have to produce science knowledge. So it becomes a way to describe the whole process of the system, I would say, of science, how it works, what it does, and all of that. So in this case, for the referential maps, we find a lot more of those explanations or processes of explaining different concepts and theories. And lastly, for books that were a little bit more interactive, in the sense that they present different activities, they have experiments, they have, some of them even have a model that you can build and you can complement the model with the reading, so you can understand the concepts that are being presented in the book. So they become books that you can read, but also books that tell you how to do things. And again, we find there's a lot of expounding, the expounding register, which comprises all these contexts that allow to build explanations. But there's also registers of enabling, which is this part that says habilitar, it's in Spanish, I'm sorry, and of doing, del hacer. And these registers allow to build context in which the reader is presented with instructions with a form of manual, or in this case, in the case of science communication books, different types of experiments and ways to recreate different scientific phenomena, and to be able to explaining through the reading of the book. So we can find this switch, and we can see that it presents many moments of explanation, along with many moments of experimentation that enable the reader to recreate any experiment, and through that understand more easily the concepts and theories that are being talked about. Now, this was only to understand how a book is composed in its linguistic form. Now, the next part was to understand how the variations, the semantic variations are working that allow to produce, in a sense, the idea or the illusion of building knowledge. So this is one table that I adapted from a conference that Diego Doran gave here in Mexico, maybe a couple years ago, 3 years ago. And the idea is to represent the different moments of semantic density along the reading of a text. So we have two types and 4 subtypes. And you can see for the technical part, we well, I focused on understanding what scientific concepts and theories were being talked about. And for every day, we found that there is a relation between those contexts of scientific contexts with things that are or tend to be more familiar for the reader. So we're not talking about things that they show you in school or in a way that would be the learning experience in school. But we find that it relates the scientific concept or theory or whatever to things that they find in their everyday life. So one of the books, for example, what does, well, I'll show you in a minute, in fact. This one, these are the graphs that we got from Mensajero de las Estrellas, Messenger of the Stars, a book about Galileo Galilei, his life, his work and everything. And it's a beautiful book, fantastic book, perfectly illustrated. And you can see in this case, the book is a narrative. It builds a narrative around Galileo and everything that he did. So the graphs here show the black line in the middle, the bold line is this one here. It's right in the middle. It becomes 0.0 if you want to, well, yeah, it becomes 0.0. So on top of it, we have moments of semantic density. And on the bottom, on the lower side, and lower part, we found moments of gravity, of semantic gravity. So in the case of building a narrative, we can expect to find a sequence of events that in this case belong to the life of Galileo Galilei. And those are the anchored moments in all three of these graphs. These graphs represent, each graph represents one page in the book. So you can see that there are many moments in which it talks about the life of Galileo. So in this case, for example, the middle graph, it talks about a little bit of the context of Italy in the life of Galileo. It talks about his parents, what they did. It talks about a little bit about his early life, and then it goes to talk about how he enrolled in the University of I forgot the name where he studied, but anyway, the university where he went and how he became a professor and how he started doing a little bit of experimenting. And then through that, it shows again a little bit about the context of Italy again. So it talks about how Italians were more preoccupied with being merchants or building art and all of those things. So in this case, we see that there's a lot of moments in which the narrative is built, but along those moments, there's moments of semantic density in which scientific concepts are being presented. In this case, this is one of the referential books. And we can see that there are many more variations that go downwards and then go upwards. And this downward movement means there is a register that is explaining something, that it's anchoring it, or is that it's using a different language, a different way of explaining it in order to be able to connect the scientific knowledge or the scientific element that has been tried to be explained to a common everyday context that the reader can understand. This book in particular, each page is a different question. So, and these are everyday questions like, how do bees produce wax? How does an electric plant work? How does a car burn gasoline? Things like that. And it explains it in a way that allows to use a very simple language, but that it is still building a scientific knowledge, which is the point of all the scientific communication books. This other one, this is one of the interactive books, and you can see that there's a lot of, again, the variation that allows to connect different scientific concepts to a context which would be more familiar to the reader and would be easier to understand. In this case, for example, it talks about simple machines. And for example, it talks about the screw and how the screw has been used in humanity for a long time. And at some point it was just a screw, like to hold things together. It also became a cork opener. It became different. Well, we found different types of use for this simple machine that science explains in a way. So it allows to connect all these dots about how this machine works and how we've been using it in history of human history. So it allows to build all this variation that eventually turns into knowledge about, in this case, machines and simple machines, and how this relates to some area of physics. In this case, this is a large part of the basic mechanics as is taught in schools. So by relating these two modes of visualizing, the core diagram and this semantic waves, we can see the different types of variations, semantic variations that are happening along the reading, and how these work along with other resources. For example, one of the things that allows these books to be so enticing in a way is the way they are configured, the disposition of the text, the different images that are presented, the different illustrations, analogies, experiments. There's a lot of things that are happening in each of these books, and all of these things are working together to build a very specific knowledge, a very specialized knowledge. In this case, that of the large area of physics and other sciences. So we can build this different visualizations to understand how different learning experiences are happening in different types of contexts. I've only analyzed science communication books, but what happens in the classroom, what happens with other types of books, what happens with college books, for example, what type of variations are they showing, and are these variations the best choice for each of these different contexts? So this would allow us to understand the ways in which we are configuring our discourse to be able to either teach or persuade in another way about scientific knowledge, and to be able to eventually build scientific knowledge as is known. Of course, they are limited, and in the case of science communications books, the idea it's not to make scientists, but it's more about building some understanding of how science works. As I said before, it's not only about giving the reader the concept and the theory. It's to make him understand or make her understand that it's about how the scientist is working, what type of methods he's using, the fact that it has to be peer reviewed, the fact that it has to have a certain structure, and that's what makes it a scientific knowledge. It's not only about the thing, it's about the whole process of how it's being built. And in the same way, these books work for the readers. So if we can expand that to try to understand the many ways in which people are learning or building different types of knowledge, we will be able to see the different patterns in these variations that allowed for this to happen. So further research is needed, and it has to be more corpus oriented. I've only worked with 12 books for my doctoral thesis, but this can be, of course, be expanded to see what's available in stores, what's available in libraries, what's available in bookstores and school libraries and all of that, and to see the different ways in which these books are being are working, and to understand that would allow us to be able to build different patterns or ways in which we can teach. and ways in which we can learn. So this is what I brought for you today, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Javier. I see that we run a little bit of time. So if you have any question for this presentation, please, I will appreciate if you write your question in the chat so that we can go back to it at the end of the session. So if you don't mind, we can go to our second presenter, who is Sylvia. So Sylvia, please, you will have also 15 to 20 minutes to present. So I will let you know 2 minutes before the end of the time so that we can move on to the other speaker, okay?
Okay, I'm going to present it. Wait a moment, please. I know it's a matter.
Also, while Sylvia is getting ready for the presentation, you can also make a selection of it. Yes, we can see it.
Okay, okay, it's perfect. Okay.
Perfect.
I'm going to put down the camera. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Sylvia Moraga. I'm come from Chile. And it's a pleasure to be here in this Congress to be able to present my research in relationship about, I'm going to present the second objective of my PhD thesis that was supervised by Marion Spinet. And the title of my research is A Semantic Perspective for the Analysis of Knowledge Building in the Teaching Learning Sequences Designed by Pre-Service Secondary Science Teacher. I am a research and academic teacher by the Metropolitan University of Science Education in Chile, and Marion Spinet is a researcher and academic teacher from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, Spain. The research question is in this study. It's we present are situated in the field of science teaching, and more specifically in the design by pre-service secondary science teacher of a teaching and learning sequences that promote modeling through the lenses of the legitimation coding theory on knowledge building. The TLS activity are analyzed in order to identify trajectories to knowledge building that promote scientific modeling in chemistry. The research question in this study is, in which way do chemistry TLS activity designed by pre-service secondary science teacher promote modeling? The research objects are the following three processes, okay? And that process, we can identify some things. For example, to identify the cognitive modelization that are promoted by the science TLS activity, we're going to establish a level. The next process, to represent the evolution of cognitive level of modeling throughout the science TLS activity, we're going to establish semantic patterns. And finally, to represent the modeling semantic wave that are generated through the evolution of the knowledge building, we're going to establish the modeling profile. Then, we base our research in the legitimation code theory, who proposed some relevantly new social concepts. What are that concepts? Semantic gravity and semantic density. Understood as a group of organizational principle underlying knowledge building with the goal of interpreting the dynamic of construction of meaning through language. The author who proposed this theory, do you know, it's Maton, 2011. He placed this concept in a study about the pedagogical practice of secondary teacher and analyzes the strategy they use to scaffold the abstract meanings of science during the course of their classroom teaching. And in 2013, Maton said that proposed a concept of semantic waves as a representation visualizing the development and knowledge building through times. For this study, we have used the LCT to analyze the modeling strategy proposed in the TLS designed by preserved secondary science teacher through the building of modeling semantic wave that include two dimensions. That dimension was, number one, the cognitive modeling level, and the second dimension is cognitive modeling translation. We intend to classify, okay, TLS according to the modeling semantic waves they introduce and propose a learning progression of future teacher in the design of science TLS. What I just said, I showed this picture. That modeling strategy proposed is it's created from that two dimensions that I said, the cognitive modeling level and cognitive modeling translation. The cognitive modeling level relationship between the two worlds, the real world and the abstract world. And the cognitive modeling translation, we have to represent the cognitive translation that you can think, you can communicate it, and you can do in the real world. But in the abstract world, you have a representation, you have a chemistry language, you have an experience. No, in that real world, you have to, only the teacher say, you have to put these things in that part. And in the abstract world, maybe the teacher bring a question. And in that part, the student have to think what are the moment that he have to do to respond that question that the teacher said. In that case, or in this research context was in the master degree, it is during 1 year, and I collect the TLS document between 2015 and 2016. They're participating 5 universities of the community of Catalonia, sorry. Girona University, Rovira i Virgili University, Pompeu Fabra University, Autónoma de Barcelona University, Barcelona University. And we collect only chemistry teaching and learning sequences. I collect 20 of that document. Then we use a context analysis to the TLS was performed, considering the activity as our unit of analysis. I'm going to review the object of this research. Remember the picture of the modeling strategy? Well, I'm going to refer to this part, and we can say how you have to thought, you have to action, and you have to and the language we're going to refer it. All of this cognitive translation are the cognitive modeling dimension, okay? And if we category the system of development of the analysis of the modeling cognitive translation proposed by the TLS activity is shown in this table. You can see that, the cognitive translation may be taught language, language action, action taught, language taught, and all of these have a coding, okay? Then we have to analysis all of the activity in the TLS, and the TLS activity proposed cognitive demands that intend to mobilize the translation between the 3 cognitive dimensions or modeling, such as thought, language, and action. 3 levels have been identified from the directionality criteria of cognitive translation: the parital level, the unidirectional level, and the bidirectional level, and more cognitive translation that are found in the in a TLS. The greater level of modeling that is promoted through its activity. So when you have more relationships between the cognitive dimension, you can create a better model. You can see if we have a more direction, you have, sorry. I'm so sorry. If you have more relationship with the cognitive translation, you have to create a better model. Okay, then to our second object to represent the evolution of cognitive level of modeling throughout of science TLS activity and establish semantic patterns. The category system used to determine the cognitive modeling levels proposed by the TLS activity. We include 5 levels. You can see it. You can 5 levels. There are. Connected the transit between the real world and the abstract world. In the real world, we can see the everyday language or empirical language. And the abstract world, we can identify the conceptual language, mathematics, and theoretical language. Each of the analysis TLS activity was design, translation, and cognitive level that were represented in the graphic that you can see in this moment. And we can represent through a context comparison process, we establish cognitive translation level, we can identify semantic patterns. You can see in this graphic, we put all of the cognitive translation in the different kind of level. We analyze all of the activity and we identify that there are 2 dimensions, and we graphic in this semantic wave. And we have a part of compares all of the process, and we identify semantic patterns. What are the semantic patterns we identify? You can see it in this moment. Based on the methodology theoretic models of Maton 2011, we identify 4 types of semantic patterns when comparing the 20 ways that describe the modeling process of the knowledge building of a TLS. We identify a linear, a mixed, a zigzag, and ascending pattern. These patterns are situated in a range of greater to smaller quality. We can identify, you can see it in the picture, the ascending pattern, the zigzag pattern, the linear pattern, and the mixed pattern. Then, in the third object, to represent the modeling semantic ways that are generated through the evolution of the knowledge building, and in that time we established the modeling profile. And we can identify the different kind of pattern. Through a context comparison process, we establish cognitive translation level, semantic patterns, and modeling profile that have allowed us to make a TLS progression proposal in relation to the modeling in chemistry. Okay, then we identify all of the patterns, then we compare the pattern in all of the sequences, and next we identify the modeling profile. The analysis of the semantic ways from the semantic patterns allow us to describe regularity and to identify 4 types of modeling profile that can become a progression. The first profile is formed by 4 TLS that favor the mixed and linear semantic patterns, and where the knowledge building focuses in the abstract world. You can see that the first activity in the TLS, it's in the real world, but all of the activity or more of the activity who have that TLS, it's on the abstract world. Okay, next, you can see it. Next, in the second profile, we found 6 TLS and linear and zigzag pattern we identified a knowledge built in the abstract world. Okay, we can see it. The first activity in this TLS begin in the abstract world, and all of the sequences or the activity in the sequences are founded in that part. They use a very not a very simple language. They use a very strong language. In the third level, for TLS, we found only the zigzag pattern is identified, which called to infer that knowledge building in the abstract world migrate from the conceptual to the theoretical. In a few occasions, go down or go to the real world. Okay, in a few moments, go to the real world, but the more activity in the TLS have be in the abstract world. Finally, in the fourth profile, 6 TLS, we found it ascending patterns can be identified, combined with the mixed patterns, from which we deduce that knowledge building follows a trajectory from the real world to the abstract world. Every time a new topic is introduced, we can see that this TLS beginning in the oh my God. We can see that the activity begin in the real world, and then the another activity in the TLS, it's go to the abstract world, and they go that I don't know what to say, it's ascending and then go down. That's the trajectory from the activity in this TLS. Through the lenses of the legitimation codic theory, we have been able to analyze the chemistry TLS from the perspective of the construction of meaning in entails. With the coexistence of the 3 research questions related to the modeling, it is demonstrated that the theoretical scholar model that they promote in general, it's a rate disciplinary model. It is evidenced through 2 fronts related to the cognitive demands of the TLS activity. The representation of the semantic wave that reveals that the cognitive trajectory of knowledge construction proposed in the TLS are mostly located in the abstract world, conceptual, mathematical, and theoretical. Okay, and this research has made it possible to contribute a progression proposal about learning in the design of the TLS that promote modeling in the pre-service secondary science teaching. We have to thanks or acknowledgement to these researches found in the Spain government and carried out within the ACELEC research group, acknowledged by the Catalan government and the CONICET Chile 2014 scholarships. Thanks very much for your attention. Sorry from a lot of things that I had to have in my presentation.
Thank you, Sylvia. No worries. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. Before we move to the next one, we have 5 minutes in case just somebody wants to ask a question.
Remember, Vicky, that the question, please, the traduction, because I have a problem to respond in Spanish, because in English.
Yeah, no problem, but Patricia is going to help us with the interpretation here in case there is any question. Maybe if there are no questions, you can make some comments in the chat. Okay, Sylvia, there is a question in the chat. I'm going to read it in English and then in Spanish, okay?
Okay.
Do some patterns show up similarly in different areas of chemistry field knowledge? Está preguntando si algunos patrones se muestran de manera similar en diferentes áreas de la química.
Muy buena pregunta, very good question. El tema en sí se ve independientemente del tema, se observa que hay una, ¿cómo podríamos decir? Una tendencia a que independientemente del tema, el profesor comienza sus actividades o al diseño de sus actividades en sus secuencias de enseñanza-aprendizaje, las comienza en el mundo abstracto y no hay tanta relación en las transiciones cognitivas.
Okay.
Es decir, él más se hace preguntas en el sentido de que defina, qué sé yo, que describa, pero no hay preguntas que argumente. ¿Y cuál es la finalidad de la argumentación? Para conocer cuál es el modelo teórico escolar que el estudiante está teniendo en ese momento frente a esa pregunta. Entonces, no se sabe eso. No sé si me queda clara la... No sé si me puedes traducir.
Permíteme. Se supone que Patricia tendría que tener la opción de traducción, pero no la veo yo tampoco activada, solamente veo como transcripción, entonces voy a intentar explicar lo que acaba de decir Sylvia. Okay, so I was looking for the interpretation channel, whether you can choose English or Spanish to listen to the comment or response, but I don't see it activated here in the Zoom section. So I'm going to try to explain what Sylvia just said to the question about the patterns. So Sylvia said that in the patterns or information that they analyzed, they looked that most of the teaching sequences start in the abstract world, regardless of the topic. So that's what their findings do. So most of the information that they look for follows a similar pattern. Okay.
Okay, Vicky, it's so correct.
Okay, thank you. See if there is okay.
If it's something like to write me in the, I have in the, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and any question you can bring me in, and I want to respond it. I don't have a problem. My mail is.
Okay.
That's my email. If Samantha like to bring me a question, I don't have any problem. I respond in the email.
Thank you, Sylvia. Well, let's move on. If there is any other question that you want to make to Sylvia, you can place it in the chat. So we're going to move on to our next presenter, but before we move on, I'd like to mention that apparently the tool for the interpretation is not activated. Patricia mentioned that. So we hope that it can be activated soon. So the next presentation is going to be in English, so we should be fine. Okay, it's there. So before we start, there is a bottom at the bottom of the menu. It says interpretation, and there you can choose the language that you would like to listen the presentation to. There is English and Spanish. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next presenter, Giovanni García Castro, Francisco Javier Ruiz Ortega, and myself as part of this research. Go on, Giovanni.
Hola, doctora Vicky, ¿se ve la presentación ahí?
Yes, sí.
Okay. Greetings. We are Giovanni García Castro, Francisco Javier Ruiz Ortega, y Vicky Ariza Pinzón from LCT, Latin American, Mexico, and Colombia. For us, it is very gratified to be in this space, presenting part of our research that is part of our doctoral thesis. This time, we will present an advance from the methodology using LCT from multimodality analysis in clinical argumentation. Its name is Autonomy Tours in Clinical Argumentation, Connecting Multimodality and Intentional Teaching Practice. From the multimodal perspective of argumentation, it is recognized that speeches follow a process that transcends oral and written language, including gestures, graphics, or body postures, demonstrating through their use the development of complex skills of thought. The study of multimodality has been gaining relevance in didactics research, recognizing that in the nature setting of school scientific construction, the interaction between the actors involved necessarily implies recognizing the multiple language used by one and the others to construct and represent meanings. We place this proposal in the field of LCT, considering argumentation is an epistemic practice that is to build knowledge. And on the other hand, we recognize the use of multiple language in the classroom, in this case, in health science. To address the problem, we want to do it by trying to answer some questions. First is why research on clinical argumentation? We have taken into account three possible fields of contribution and development. First, to improve professional standards, like handling complex situations, clinical problems, and take a critical look on health disease phenomenon. Second, for critical thinking development, for example, to improve problems resolution and the use of knowledge in a specific and complex situation. And finally, building science in the classroom. For us, the teaching and learning process is mediated by language. Arguing to build knowledge, and there should be an intentional use of resource to promote argumentation and awareness of using multiple language when arguing. Considering language as a mediator of cognitive process. Another question to answer is why why research on argumentation and multimodality in health science? We consider that the argumentation is a cognitive linguistic ability that is built by multiple ways in multiple language. For example, other modes are used in addition to oral or written language. Finally, applies to discursive communities when there is a specific language of the discipline. This led us to propose a general objective is to understand how the intentional use of multimodal resource by medical professors is related to promotion of clinical argumentation. And one specific objective is to characterize the multimodal resource used by teachers and their intent and use in promoting clinical argumentation in the classroom using the autonomy dimension of LCT. For this, we must place ourselves in the theoretical perspective on the proposed categories. The first is the argumentation, and precisely in argumentation in science didactics, we understand the argumentation like a cognitive linguistic ability that has been approached from different trends. Additionally, it's also considered school science construction promoter from the perspective of ability to build points of view, unlike epistemic practice. Regarding multimodality, we start from the fact of natural scene of the school scientific building, and the language is a mean of legitimation of knowledge, recognizing the multiple and specialized language in the science classroom. At the present, the legitimation code theory has been gaining strength as a construct based on a set of concepts known as dimension, and as a tool that make it possible to analyze not only the contribution of each language of the assessment of argumentative process in the classroom, but also as a tool to explore different organizing principles that underlie the practice, disposition, and context of a particular discursive community. For the methodology, this research will be carried out with medical professors who will be videotaped while promoting clinical argumentation through the use of multimodal resource. Then this cues analysis will be carried out looking for the characterization of multimodal clinical argumentation scenarios. For example, use of resource like oral speech, graphic resource, gestures, or models. For the analysis, we have built a specific translation device for autonomic code and adapt for this research. This device is based on two aspects. One is the teacher's intention when using resource to promote debate and argumentation. And the other is the argumentation itself, which must have a clear and explicit thematic and conceptual focus. At the top is the category of, and the top is the category aiming or with objective, which show a clear thematic focus, therefore with a good argumentative performance, what varies in the association of the resource proposed by the teacher, which may or may not be associated with it. Below is aimless or without objective, where the discourse is unfocused from the point of view of the specific topics, therefore the argumentation will be limited. In this case, the efforts of the teacher could be present or not. If we transfer it to the plane of autonomy, we have the following scheme. Up to the, well, and in the vertical axis is intentional of use of multimodal resource in generation of clinical argumentation, and the horizontal axis is promotion of clinical argumentation evidenced by clear thematic focus. Up on the right side is in focus and associated. up into the left side is unfocused and associated. Unfocused and associated. Down to the right is in focus not associated. And down into the left and is unfocused and not associated. We validated this device first with a pilot test, and then in discussion session with experts in this case with the LCT Latin American group. We are some here. Here are some images of the pilot test with a medicine professor and her student in video recorded session and multimodal analysis of the argument. We can see graphic resource, gestures, oral resource. In this case, is only images. And it is possible to see the use of resource in an intentional way to promote space for argumentation. These were transcribed and analyzed in terms of intention and whether or not they promote argumentation in students. In this format, the argumentative scenarios were transcribed and evaluated according to their positional autonomy and relational autonomy, with a plus or minus sign. In red, the red words, the concept must focus on the topic raised, that this case was cerebrovascular accident or stroke. In green words, the least focused. For example, in this moment, it is noted that the discourse and the resource are very focused on the subject, and that the argumentation by the teacher is greatly promoted. Is in Spanish, but the concept is focusing in stroke. In the next moment, the focus is lost a bit, but the teacher maintains her class purpose and continue trying to achieve scenarios for debate and exchange of ideas. In this case, is unfocused, but is associated. Then the focus is recovered and the argument's focus is on the specific topic that is being addressed. Is in focus and associated again. When transferring into the level of autonomy, we find that there is a movement of the argumentation focus, in the right to the left, but not in of the teacher intention, which remained on the upper side of the graph. If we see it in function of what is proposed by the professors Mayton and Howard in their publication, Taking Autonomy Tours, a Key to Integrative Knowledge Building, where ways of understanding tools we are proposed, we could place this pilot test in our round trip, back and forth or return trip, where the proposed intention of the teacher is maintained, but the argumentative focus moves from the right to the left and the left to the right in the upper side, upside. Because it's in focus associated and unfocused associated, but principally is is in focus associated in the right and up. For this pilot test, we take preliminary conclusions. One is the pilot test has provided data that support the applicability of the specific toleration device for the autonomy code. We have managed to identify a type of trip during the analysis exercise. In this case, a return trip. We speak of an intentional teaching practice that achieves, for the most part, maintain the argumentative and thematic focus. Additionally, it is considered a validate device that can be used in the rest of the doctoral research. We consider possible contribution to the teaching of medicine from the application on LCT. We consider that this exercise contributes from a theoretical and methodological point of view to research in clinical argumentation, taking the concept of LCT and the code of autonomy specifically. For us, it has been very gratified to achieve this preliminary analysis, and we hope to be able to apply to the analysis in the doctoral thesis. We hope in the short term to show the advance in the application of this instrument, and specifically the incorporation of the LCT in the investigation of the didactic of the health science. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giovanni. That was an interesting presentation. Always nice to hear you. And we have like a few minutes before going on to the next one so that we can refresh a little bit and try to come to dialogue. Is there any question now or for Giovanni? Or comment? Okay. Apparently we don't have questions. Again, if you have any comment, you can post it in the chat so we can move on to our last talk from this slot. And next presenting is Ruben Massey from Argentina. Are you ready, Ruben?
Yes, I'm ready, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first, I would like to thank all the organizers of this huge event around the world, around the clock, yes. And also to Vicky, Ariza, Pinzón, for inviting me to present in the Latin American group today. So thank you all, yes, for that. And thanks, Lee, for your support as well. Yeah. Okay. Well, the name of my presentation is, I will share my PowerPoint in a minute, but the name of my presentation is, well, I will share it now. In fact, I changed my mind. Okay. All right. Can you see it in full screen?
No, we can see the slides, but not in full screen.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, so I will try it again. Sorry. Okay.
There you go. We can see it full screen now.
Yes. Okay. And has it moved to the word cloud?
No, it's on the, yeah, it's on the word cloud.
Okay. So just testing that. Thank you. Well, so the name of my presentation is Semantics in Initial Teacher Education, an Exploratory Study. And I am Ruben Massey from Argentina. And in the presentation is divided into basically three main parts. In the first part of the presentation, I'm going to present the context for this exploratory study and the gaps I have found in relation to knowledge building in this context. Then in the second part, I will make reference to the semantic dimension in LCT as a framework to try to fill in these gaps in knowledge building and practice in my students. And then I will share some hypotheses on how knowledge in the subject I teach, that I will give you more information in a minute, moves along semantic waves, basically taking into account semantic gravity and semantic density, and how this knowledge can become cumulative so that teachers can implement the concept, the constructs, the theories they are learning in the subject in their future practicum as teachers and in their future professions as teachers of English as a foreign language. I will also present a tentative plan for this academic year, 2022, that we are started in Argentina in April, to continue delving deeper into these exploratory studies results, findings, which are quite tentative, and trying to implement in a more systematic way the semantic dimension of LCT theory. Yes. So I hope that anticipating the conclusions that this study and this research that I will continue carrying out will help to to students for the better acquisition of knowledge, but also for students to be able to see how theory and practice interact and how they should recontextualize the knowledge, the theory, yes, for both their immediate context in the institution of higher education as students, as part of a community of learning, but also as in their future professions as teachers of English as a foreign language. So, so I explored the application of the relationship between theory and practice in the last year, in 2021, but with no systematic way, yes, considering the semantic dimension in LCT. I did it more trying to make connections or to make connections visible for students between what I was teaching and what they were supposed to learn, I expected to learn, and also to apply in practice. But I found that knowledge in initial teacher education may be part, or I mean, it is planned in the curriculum designs as part of a continuum, yes, through the very first year of the course of studies to the very last. But in some cases, knowledge is segmented among the subjects, even when the subjects share the same or similar name or the same perspective. So the idea is to try to, well, to move in the direction of trying to avoid this segmentation between subjects and also within the one subject. So this work cloud, in fact, I haven't done it. It was Google Docs who provided this beautiful word cloud, yes, from my notes on the presentation. And you can see here what the topics of issues I will be touching upon in my presentation. Well, the semantic side, the students, teachers as future teachers, the context, well, and some others, no, the theory, practice, visible, etc. But you tell me if the slides are moving. Is that okay? Now there is one that says
teaching and exploration context.
Oh yes, okay, thank you. All right, so it's working. So the teaching and exploration context is, well, as I mentioned before, is a course of studies in initial teacher education in La Plata, the city where I live, in the province of Buenos Aires, Argentina. And there students enroll to continue to carry out their course of studies, and when they graduate, they get their degrees as teachers of English as a foreign language, so qualified teachers of English, to teach basically in primary and secondary school. The subject, the course I teach, is called in English, I translated it, is Discursive Practices of Written Communication 2. This is part of the curriculum. And this is a subject in the second year of studies. This same subject, Discursive Practices of Written Communication, is also in first year, so with the number 1, also in the third year of studies, so Discursive Practices of Written Communication 3, and also in the fourth year, okay? So the commonalities among the subjects is that they deal with discursive practices, and mainly with a focus on written communication, written texts. But what I mentioned before is that, well, I could find some segmentation in the different courses. So that is a gap we have to fill in, yes, trying to find a correlation between the different subjects and to avoid segmentation between the contents. At the level of my subjects, that is Discursive Practices in Written Communication 2, these are the course contents. Well, this is just a brief of the contents, yes. They are more details in the syllabus, in the course syllabus. But what the students learn, the knowledge students acquire in this subject is related to genre-based pedagogy, some aspects of systemic functional grammar, and in relation to writing, we follow the reading into writing approach. So what are students expected to do with that knowledge, with the knowledge about genre, with the knowledge about, I don't know, cohesion, lexical cohesion, nominal groups, appraisal system, etc. And in relation to what they read, why they read it, or what they write also, yes, and how the knowledge can help them also to write the text they are expected to write. Well, and in this sense, this is the gaps I see in the integration between theory and practice. Even if they are, I mean, writing and these contents are part of the different subjects in the different years, I can see, as I mentioned before, no apparent cumulative learning between discursive practices 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is an issue we have to consider in the future to help students develop their knowledge, to build knowledge, yes, in a cumulative way, yes, building on previous knowledge. And also, this leads to segmented learning, of course, because knowledge is seen or is locked into its curricular and pedagogic context, and not in relation to the other subjects. So this is in relation to the subjects. But then, in relation to the contents of the subject of the course, I am worried because of, to see if my students can see the relevance, as it says there in the slide, the relevance of the contents, both in their immediate context, yes, as students at Initial Teacher Education College, and also for the future context at school as professionals, yes, as teachers of English as a foreign language. My question was basically, how can we change, or how can I change or help my students change the situation of this idea of knowing what, yes, knowing the contents, knowing about genres, knowing about lexical cohesion, knowing about theme and rhyme, etc., but not knowing how or why. That is the purpose. That is why they are learning that. Yes, I tell my students that, well, that is in the core syllabus because, well, first because the curriculum design tell me that I have to teach that, but also in the adaptation I do to the contents is not because I just want to teach that, but it is also because I think it is beneficial for their future practice as teachers, learning these contents. Yes. So my preoccupation is, well, how can I help teachers, students, future teachers to develop these situated practices based on the knowledge they are acquiring in the subjects? So I found a guiding star, yes, that was the dimension of semantics in legitimation code theory. I found that when I discovered this theory some years ago in a conference in Mendoza, in one of the provinces in my country, a lecture by Carl Mason, well, that opened my eyes, and I see that the theory has a lot to provide, well, teachers and people in general from the different fields to analyze different aspects of their professions, of their occupations, etc. What called my attention, or what I found more relevant for to start with my exploration in my subject, in my course, was the dimension of semantics. Yes, because I wanted to make visible, yes, for students that what they are learning, yes, is connected to what they are going to do when teaching, for example, when planning a lesson. Yeah. So how these two codes, the semantic gravity and the semantic density, can interact, yes, within the context of the course. Yes. And for the audience who may not be familiar with these codes, with this dimension, just a brief note on what is meant by semantic gravity and semantic density, and what we mean when we strengthen semantic gravity and when we weaken semantic gravity, or in other words, when semantic gravity is stronger or weaker. Yes. Strengthening semantic gravity has to do with moving down in the wave, yes, from abstract concepts, from generalizations, from theory, to concrete examples, to situated practices. That because semantic gravity has to do with the dependence of knowledge to the context where it is applied, applied. And when weakening semantic gravity, we go in the opposite direction, but building on the previous one, that is moving from concrete or situated practices to theory or to more abstract ideas. And in relation to semantic density, it has to do with meaning, yes, and how complex, let's say, meaning is, yeah. So as teachers, we are constantly moving from everyday language to more specific or technical, yes, or academic language to reach our students' learning, yes, to help them learn, to guide them, to scaffold their learning and their knowledge acquisition or knowledge building. So when weakening semantic density, we may paraphrase or unpack, yes, a dense concept by using everyday concepts or language, yes. So maybe I can deal with genres, for example, or the definition of genres, but from a theoretical perspective. But also I can use a specific concrete example, let's say, I don't know, a shopping list or a short story, yes, to show students how that theory could be understood better, yes, when using concrete examples. And strengthening semantic density is in the opposite direction, that is using concrete cases or problems to solve and relating or repacking those concrete situations into a theoretical framework, that is going from the concrete situations, concrete examples to more theory. So you see, we have the two codes, semantic density, referring to meaning and how dense or how complex meaning is, and how we can facilitate knowledge acquisition through the theories, etc. And the semantic gravity, dealing with how dependent meaning is on the context where it is that knowledge is used or applied. Well, so to continue exploring this semantic dimension, I want to work in this at the beginning of the following term, yes, in higher education, with different tasks that have to do with problem solving and presenting students, as it said there, with the notion of semantic gravity. That is how context should be integrated, yes, to theory and knowledge, so that theory is significant to students' learning. This should be done in a more systematic way in this stage of the exploration, in the following stage, so that presenting students precisely these notions of semantic gravity and semantic density. And also, I think that semantic gravity is also, or could easily be worked in tandem with semantic density to explore the degree of abstraction and concreteness or recontextualization needed to understand concept constructs or the contents of the subjects. That is, in other words, make students have an active participation in the acquisition of knowledge, to make not only the contents visible, but most importantly, I think, to make knowledge acquisition visible. Yes, for example, by students knowing that they or we together are unpacking, repacking, etc., the concepts, and also in relation to a specific context.
Ruben, sorry, it's Lee here. I'm really interested to hear a little bit more. Have you got an example of the kind of problem-solving task that you have in mind?
Yes. Problem solving is, for example, for instance, I may be teaching, or students may be learning, for instance, lexical cohesion, for example. Yes. So they learn the definition. They know all the different resources for lexical cohesion according to Halliday's framework. And I found that they may define what lexical cohesion is. They may repeat the different possibilities for making text cohesive through lexis, or for analyzing the relationship of lexis in texts. But then if I ask them, well, now imagine, or I give them a scenario, imagine you have to work with lexical cohesion in primary or secondary school in a class, yes? Always teaching English as a foreign language. And they look at me, yes, and they don't know exactly how to apply it. So I say, well, first I have to guide them to scaffold the activity and to provide examples, yes, modeling, that they can use lexical cohesion, for example, as part of a reading strategy if they are working with reading, yes, trying to identify keywords or words that are related before reading in detail in a preparation reading stage, and then how that lexical cohesion can help them to students at school to understand text better and to find more connections between the lexis among the different other elements of the texts, no? So, or when working with genres, for example, we see, well, the structures of the name, how to name genres, how they are organized depending on the genre, the purpose, the possible audience, the possible producers, typical language, grammar, vocabulary of the different genres. But then if I ask them, for example, well, I give them a text for possible use in secondary school, for example, and I say, well, how can you apply this genre knowledge if you have to work with this text from the reading skill? Yes, I mean, students have to read this text. So they came up with the traditional questions for a teaching sequence that is, well, mainly, well, read the title, anticipate or activate some background knowledge. And then they move on to some more to some questions for students to get specific answers from the texts. But there's no mention to genres, yes? So, and then I make visible, let's say, that genres or the genre knowledge can also be used, or genre knowledge or genre awareness activation, let's say, can be also used as a reading strategy, yes? Because if the students know that they are reading, let's say, an encyclopedia article, they will know the purpose, they expect certain organizations, certain language, yes? Also some elements of multimodality as well, yes? So that's what I'm trying to do, trying to see, yeah, okay, right. Well, this is my plan for next year, yes, to work from this month tentatively, teaching students explicitly how to wave, yes, how to work with semantic gravity and semantic density, and to also observe the shifts in gravity and density according to how they are progressing, yes, in their analysis of knowledge of the theories and the meanings and also the contexts of application, yes. And then in the second part of the course, yes, from August to October, maybe I think I will ask students to be more independent in their analysis of the semantics dimension and the semantic codes, and to analyze, yes, the integration of knowledge and its application in a more independent way, trying to give them more agency, yes, as students. And then, well, a final analysis of experience, yes, from both this, from the students, from me, and from students and me, yes. So I see that, these are some of the contents of the subjects: genre pedagogy, systemic functional grammar, and the meta functions, for example, and different elements, resources to enact the different meta functions, yes, and reading interpreting approaches as well. So here on the on the top, I wrote, yes, what the students learn. Yes, that is understanding and probably remembering or repeating the theory for an exam. Yes, which have to do with a stronger semantic density and a weaker semantic gravity. So, and then moving downwards, I expect students will realize, yes, or to make visible that the purpose of why they are learning that is the application of the theory of the contents in real implementation in real contexts. So trying to promote, let's say, a stronger semantic gravity, and that the semantic density maybe will remain the same, but the students will see it as less, yes, as weaker semantic density. So to analyze this is tentative, yes, but I think that in relation to semantic density, I will focus my analysis of the data in the definition of concepts that students read about or find in the bibliography, in the theories, and how they can place those contexts, those concepts in categories. Yes, that this is something they find difficult, and how they can extend the formal definition of a certain concept, let's say lexical cohesion, yes, through presenting distinguishing features of that concept in that category by, for example, comparing, contrasting the concept with another concept, or by exemplifying, for example. But then, and this is, I think, the most interesting part, is how they can apply that into their near context. So this would be another concept to analyze in the data, yes, the context, how they see the application of the theories to the immediate context, yes, as students, as in the learning community, that is the academic practices and the role of knowledge about language in those practices, because they are also, I mean, the classes, I haven't mentioned this, but the classes are wholly in English, yes. And also, as I mentioned before, the students' future context, yes, in their practicum in the last year of the course of studies, when they have to practice in real schools, yes, in real classes, and also in their future as teachers in schools. Yes, so I hope we can find the interaction between these two broad elements, let's say, yes, useful, yes, and of possible application. Well, these are some examples of what we can use, but I have already mentioned this, some examples of this, and some possible tasks in relation to strengthening the semantic gravity and weakening the semantic density could be, as I mentioned before, some problem-solving tasks, or analyzing lesson plans by other teachers, yes, and see if the knowledge they are acquiring, the theories, the concepts, are revealed in those lesson plans. Also planning themselves, probably collaboratively, teaching sequences, being aware that they should or that they are applying the concepts from the theory for a real context, yes, and also mentoring other classmates, yes, to apply the theory to task design, for example, or to teaching sequences planning. And another one could be, well, inquiry and metacognition. Yes, that is, I think this should be always present. Yes, students reflecting on their on what they are learning and how they are learning and the purpose of the knowledge they are acquiring. So to sum up, is making learning and thinking visible. Yes, as it is the topic of this session today. Yes, making learning and knowledge visible. Yes. So, well, so this is my experience with the semantic dimension. Yes. And well, as I mentioned before, this was an exploratory study, yes, and I hope, well, that in the future, when I have more concrete findings, I can share them and that they may contribute to the design of teaching and sequences of planning, etc., for other teachers as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruben, and thanks everyone in this table who have participated. I'm just to wrap up, I'm going to make a summary. So Javier talked about how knowledge is built in science book for children. Then Sylvia talked about learning sequences developed by chemistry teachers. And Giovanni talked about autonomy tours in clinical argumentation. And then Ruben explained how he's planning to use semantics. And that pretty much gives us a picture of how we are using LCT in Latin America and in the different fields. Okay, so I'm not sure if you have like a couple of questions to ask the presenters now. If not, we're going to close with our final reflections about how to make knowledge visible in your own fields.
Vicky, may I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, because I typed it in the chat, but probably you couldn't see it. It is for Javier. Is he here? Is he still here? I can see.
Yes, he's here.
Ah, yes. Okay. No, Javier, my question was because you were talking about, you were analyzing science texts for children, yes, both narrative and I think you call them referential, yes, or expository texts, yes. My question is if you, because you analyze this from the readings perspective, I think, and if there was any analysis of what if students had to produce, yes, knowledge acquired from those texts in, for example, in writing or in a discussion, oral discussion, yes, and if so, if there was or there is any difference between I mean, understanding, comprehending narrative texts about science compared to referential or expository texts about science.
Yes, thank you. One of the first things that we found about science communication discourse is that it works a little different than learning experience in the classroom. So in this case, books about science communication try not to present assignments or forms of testing the knowledge that it's been trying to be taught. So this is one of the reasons why this discourse tries to make the reader come to these books voluntarily. It needs to be good enough to the eye, to say it some way, so the reader can see this book and be attracted to it and want to read it and to find out what it talks about. So giving them assignments or trying to test what they've learned becomes, you know, it's against the object of these books. But what we did find out is that a way to evaluate how this knowledge is being built is by trying to understand how these things that they read are taken into their everyday lives. So if they learn, for example, about friction in the laws of motion, how does this become a significant knowledge for them? Do they learn to see it in everyday life? Do they recognize where there could be, you know, an analysis based on friction or things like that? So it mostly depends on how the things that they read are taken, as I said, into their everyday lives. It's not much about bringing a test or trying to find out how much they learned, because that becomes counterproductive. It breaks what science communication is trying to do, which is basically attract people to understand science. So what we talk about is about building science literacy, which is precisely that. How is this knowledge being used in everyday life to understand whatever scientific context they are being faced with? For example, if we talk now about the pandemic and we try to understand how it's working in each of our countries, it would be better if we could understand how a virus works, how it reproduces, how it moves from one host to another, and understand all of that part. And that's what I mean by science literacy, to understand the whole workings, the whole gears and mechanisms of science, so we can understand everything that has been told to us in a way that becomes significant. That way, I, as a normal reader, can take decisions based on what I understand about the science discourse and the whole science constellation, to take and to use the terms of the LCT. So yes, I hope I answered.
Yes, thank you, Javier.
Thank you. I also have a question for Javier, because you say those are science communication, no? So kids are free to select what to read. No? My question would be, if the books that you analyze, where do they come from first? And if the books you analyze make knowledge visible so that kids can pick them on their own.
Yes, these books that I've selected were actually the ones that were most available at that time, which was 4 years ago already, in Puebla, in the city of Puebla. So I found this in libraries, bookstores, different libraries and universities, in other schools, in the same institute where I'm working. So the books that were the most available, that's the one that I took. And I realized also that when it comes to these kinds of books, most of them or a lot of them are only editions. So for example, I have one that's called Messenger of the Stars, Mensajero de las Estrellas. It's a fantastic book. I love it. It's beautiful. It has a nice story. It talks about Galileo Galilei, who is one of my favorite scientists. And so it's just an amazing book. But it was only available for a very short period of time. So now if I try to find it, I didn't get it that time. But if I try to look for it, it's around $400. So it's not a cheap book anymore because it was an only edition. So this happens to a lot of these books. And that's a bit of a problem, because we don't get to measure how the reception of each of these books is happening. So there are some books that become very successful, like one of the ones that I've showed was 100 Cosas que Saber de Ciencia, 100 Things to Know About Science. And this is a very nice book because it does show a lot of illustrations that allow to visualize how some sort of knowledge is understood in the science community. For example, it has one page that it's all related to what Einstein worked on. So it has several diagrams which explain how a particle of light moves, what it means that it has energy, what it means that it has mass, what it means that it can reach the speed of light and all of that. And it shows a lot of diagrams that represent that knowledge. The cool thing about that book is that it never really uses a scientific language. So it talks about particles, it talks about waves, it talks about quantums, it talks about a lot of these complex things, but it does so in a language that is very, I would say simple, but I think a better word would be familiar to an everyday reader. Someone that doesn't know anything about science or that knows very little about science. So it's a way to relate all that knowledge and by using a certain composition of register in linguistic terms that allow to build that sort of language, which is why it's so interesting.
Thank you. Okay, we have a few minutes left, and I would like to ask our presenters to wrap up and say in 1 minute or two, because we don't have too much time, but in 1 minute or two, how did your studies make you make knowledge visible in your different fields and in your different contexts? Who would like to start?
Well, I'll say the first thing, I guess. I think it's been an amazing journey to understand this theory and to see how it works related to my work, but it's also, to understand that there are many more sectors of knowledge that we didn't see before and that are now being related. So, it's fun to understand these kinds of relations, but it also makes you a little bit paranoid because now you have to understand a whole other bunch of things. It's not only about knowledge, it's about the knower, it's about the ways that he's knowing, it's about how these relate to each other, it's about how these relate to a certain context and how it works in society and how society is built and and it becomes a huge thing that provides a lot of information. And to understand all the codes that are immersed in all of these processes is what makes it so useful, at least to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, may I, Vicky?
Sure, Ruben, go ahead.
Yes, well, I think my concern is how to make knowledge visible for students who are going to be teachers of English as a foreign language in the future. So my concern is how that knowledge can be integrated to concrete contexts, yes, to situated practices. And the theory, I think, is attractive in my view because of many things, yes, but what I see also in higher education is that there is generally a tension between disciplinary knowledge, that is what teachers have to teach in their courses in higher education, and between didactics in higher education, that is how we teach those that knowledge, those contents, yes. So generally teachers, well, I don't know if it's generally, but it could be that teachers focus more on disciplinary knowledge, yes, because they are the experts on the subject, they are the field they are teaching. But sometimes they do not consider much how they are teaching that, so that students can learn well, in a cumulative way, not segmented, yes, and finding a significance to what they are learning. So I think by working with the dimensions, we can see that this can help, yes, because we will see the disciplinary knowledge contents, but also try to see how that knowledge can be learned by students, yes. In my case, well, what I am doing now is exploring the semantics dimension, yes, but well, all the other dimensions are also easily implemented, I think, yes, in this sense, yes. So this is what we can call making knowledge visible, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. Okay, Giovanni and Sylvia, we have a couple of minutes. Giovanni?
Dr. Vicky, knowledge becomes visible and is validated through the argumentation and the use of language, which is where is it legitimate. For medical science, it is essential to be able to consolidate that knowledge and make it tangible.
Yes, tangible.
Tangible, and well, is for me is so important, this opportunity for talk about my work, and thank you very much to you and the others members of the LCT Latin America and the global community.
Okay, thank you, Giovanni. Now Sylvia is going to wrap up in Spanish, and Patricia is going to interpret. So if you want to listen to the English version, just click on the English channel so that you can listen to the interpretation. Sylvia, go ahead, please.
Bueno, la teoría de código de legitimización en la aplicación o para el análisis de la secuencia de enseñanza-aprendizaje nos permitirá conocer cómo el profesor en formación inicial de ciencias, específicamente de química, pueda diseñar sus actividades, pueda diseñar su secuencia haciendo uso de preguntas que permitan al estudiante responder de acuerdo al conocimiento que ellos tengan. ¿Ya? Es decir, conocer sus conceptos previos, para luego el profesor generar preguntas más complejas para que él vaya poco a poco desarrollando y vaya implementando o aplicando los modelos teóricos que va a ir aprendiendo en el transcurso del proceso. Entonces eso es importante, de qué manera el profesor en formación inicial diseña una secuencia que le permita generar preguntas en este mundo real, que yo le digo, no un mundo que para el estudiante le es más favorecedor, conocedor, para luego intervenir y desarrollar preguntas donde vaya desarrollando más habilidades, como por ejemplo las habilidades cognitivo-lingüísticas. Entonces, yo me doy cuenta que los profesores en formación inicial les cuesta mucho bajar a un nivel en la cual hacen preguntas que al estudiante le es favorable. Generalmente me encuentro con preguntas como ¿qué es el átomo? ¿O qué es la célula? Como primera pregunta al inicio de una actividad, al inicio de una primera unidad. En vez de preguntar cómo consideras tú que está, cómo está hecha la materia, o preguntas más asociadas a una conceptos que a él le vayan más de su conocimiento, ¿no? Concepciones más sencillas, y ahí desde allí ir construyendo. Entonces, la forma para poder identificar cómo el profesor, o para representar esta secuencia que el profesor está haciendo en la teoría del código de legitimización, me ha funcionado significativamente, porque el profesor en formación inicial puede ver a través de esta representación gráfica de la onda semántica cómo va bajando o subiendo, o cómo es el movimiento sinusoidal de sus preguntas en esta secuencia de enseñanza-aprendizaje. Y a ello hay un artículo que yo estoy generando que lo asocio con el contexto. Entonces ahí yo veo la onda y cómo esta onda se asocia con la contextualización. Cómo esta pregunta o estas preguntas están en contexto. Me doy cuenta que hay preguntas que no están en contexto, que no tienen ninguna relación con nada. En cambio hay otras que sí, hay todo un una performance, digámoslo así, asociada a esta pregunta. Así que es un artículo que ya luego va a salir digamos, en alguna publicación en inglés para que todos lo puedan leer. Eso. Espero responder al diálogo que se está generando en este momento.
Muchas gracias, Silvia. Claro que sí. Thank you very much. I think we all agree here in the region that it's really important to debrief and make knowledge visible for our students, and through the different dimensions and tools that you have presented, you have showed us ways to do so and help our students succeed in their different fields. Thank you very much for this table and this session. So we're going to kind of switch the mood a little bit so that we don't feel that it's a long session. So we're going to have our next speakers, and Alejandra is going to help me to introduce them so that we can move on with the schedule. Ale, are you still there?
Yes, thank you. So our next presenters are